Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. So this is a tag that I do every single year and it actually marks my Booktube birthday. So today, I think actually on the day that this is going up, it's actually aligned on exactly the day. But this marks my 4-year Booktube birthday. So this tag was created by Chami. I will link Chami's channel down in my description box. But there are 13 questions in this tag and it is all about reflecting on where you are at the midpoint of the year, your favourite books, books that have made you cry, favourite characters and all that kind of jazz. But there are 13 questions and we are just going to get stuck into it. So question number 1 is, what is your favorite book of the year so far? And I have actually just made a video that is all of my favorite books by month, but the one that actually wins and is my favorite book of the year so far is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 3 in the Stormlight archive. In the UK they are split into 2, so if I was being specific about this, then it would be Oathbringer part 2, because this is like the conclusion where all of the things happened. But the Stormlight archive is an adult epic fantasy series. It's very dense, it's very expansive, and it surrounds a war between the Alethi and the Parshendi. Most of the perspectives you follow right at the beginning of the series are tied to the Alethi side of the war. Either they're directly involved or they know somebody or are related to somebody who is. And the reason the Alethi have gone to war with the Parshendi is because the Parshendi orchestrated the assassination of the Alethi king. Now I just generally really love Brandon Sanderson. I find his plot work and his plot reveals to be masterful. I also really like the characters in here. It did take a while for this series to grow on me, but by the time we got to Oathbringer, the reveals towards the end of this book had me tearing up at points, and I was so shocked. But the thing about Brandon Sanderson is he lays all the groundwork for his plot points, and if you were clever enough you could guess what they are, but every single time he surprises me. So this is currently my favorite book of the year, and we will have to see if something tops it. I actually don't know at this point. The second question is the best sequel you've read so far in 2021, and this one was actually really difficult for me because I was going through all of the sequels that I've read, and actually a recurring theme throughout this year is that I'm finding that the first book in a series is more enjoyable than the sequel. So for this one I had to go with The Mask Fallen by Samantha Shannon. This is the 4th book in the Bone Season series, and this series is set in a futuristic version of London where clairvoyancy is illegal. Our main character, Paige Mahoney, is indeed a clairvoyant, and one day when she is on the train visiting her father, she is caught using her abilities and she's taken away to this secret location that really throws open the world. So I would say that this is one of my favorite series. I really enjoy the world in here. I think it has a lot of points of emotion, but the 4th book essentially serves as a bridge between the first 3 books, which make up one story arc, and the 3 books to come, which will make up a second story arc. It opened up the world a lot because this one is set in Paris as opposed to London, and it dealt a lot with the repercussions of the first story arc and the main character recovering and finding herself again. As well as that, we also had some epic plot points in here. There are a lot of questions about this series. It brought us closer to the answers to some theories that we have, because I was part of a read along for this series as well, without quite giving it to us, and that's really frustrating because it's been taking Samantha Shannon a while to write these books. But I'm really excited to get some answers hopefully in the next story arc, because this one ends on a really big cliffhanger as well. Question 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but really want to, and for this one I had to go with Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. There are quite a few new releases that I haven't gotten to yet, but I think that this one is the one that I'm most desperate to read. So I'm a big fan of the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard. It is the first young adult fantasy book that I read that introduced me to young adult fantasy really, and fantasy as a genre, because I was reading fantastical stories before that, but I was also reading a whole ton of contemporary. So I really enjoy Victoria Aveyard. I don't know if I would enjoy Red Queen as much if I read it now, but it definitely holds a special place in my heart. So when I found out that Victoria Aveyard was coming out with a new series, I had to pick it up, and I'm so desperate to read this. I don't actually know too much about this one, to be honest, aside from that it is a multi-perspective high fantasy, but I'm definitely hyped and I really hope I can get to it before the end of the year. Question number 4 is your your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I have also just made a video that is my anticipated releases from June all the way through to the end of the year. I would say out of all of the ones on that list, my most anticipated are Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff, which is an adult, I'm going to assume it's going to be a grimdark fantasy that follows a vampire. That is all I know about it, but I know that I really want to read it. And the second one is Beautiful Nightmares by KJ Sutton, which is the 4th installment in the Fortuna Swan series. And this one is a self-published fantasy romance that follows a young woman called Fortuna who is a nightmare, and her brother has gone missing 2 years prior to the start of the story. So Fortuna is pretty much about to give up hope because her brother vanished without a trace when she is approached by a very powerful fairy male who tells her that he can take her directly to her brother providing that she marries him. I adore this series. It gives me a whole ton of pain and I actually really live for that. It also has some obviously romance themes throughout there as well, and I'm really excited to see where the next installment in the series is going to take it. Question number 5 is my biggest disappointment of the year, and for that I'm going to have to without a doubt go for Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is by no means my lowest rated book of the year, but this is the 3rd installment in the Blood and Ash series. It centers around this young woman called Poppy who is the maiden, and she is chosen by the gods and destined to ascend. She's kept in captivity, she can't be looked upon, she can't experience pleasure, she can't be touched, and the love interest in here is a very skilled guard called Hawk who is assigned to Poppy to guard her until her ascension. So I have had some problems throughout this series that are also present in this one. I just find them to be so much more prevalent in this book. I really love the dramatic plot twist. I also really like the romance in the first 2 books, but in this one I just found that the romance was really cheesy and I just really was not about it. As well as that, there is a lot of telling and not showing, which has been present throughout the first 2 books, but in here it is just chapters and chapters and chapters of the main character sitting down with another character and her asking him questions, and then he will feed the plot and all of the world building and the history to her. And in the first like 3 chapters of this there are 2 villain monologues. I don't think that the fantastical elements in here are well done at all. I was really disappointed by this one, especially because the last like 50-60 pages of this book, 5-star material. But the rest of it, I just know I was not a big fan. Question number 6 is your biggest surprise of the year, and I actually struggled with this one. One of the reasons is because one of the books I mentioned is already going to be throughout this video quite a lot, coming up in the next like 7 questions. So I went with Buffy the Vampire Slayer Volume 1, High School is Hell. This is the first installment in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot comic. If you are unfamiliar with Buffy, it is a very popular TV show that started in the 90s. It is my favorite TV show of all time, and this one is a modernized version of it. So it's set in 2019 and it brings all of the characters portrayed as the original actors into the 21st century and just brings everything up to date with the times. Now the reason why this surprised me is because I am somebody who is very sensitive to Buffy things, because it is such a big part of my childhood and I like to kind of preserve it and keep it as its own thing to preserve my feelings about it. Like I rewatch Buffy all the time. I'm currently rewatching it with my patrons. So I was a little bit nervous going into this one because I'm just resistant to anything that could possibly ruin Buffy for me. However, I really like what they did with this comic. My favorite thing about this is the art. If I show you one of the art pages in the back, so that was the initial reason that I actually picked this up, but I actually think that they've done a really good job of encapsulating the story of Buffy, and they've also brought in plot lines that were only introduced later in the TV show and woven them through the beginning of this reboot. So there is a character who is a teenager in high school with everybody else in this comic who was actually only introduced in season 7 of the TV show. We also have plot lines from the spin-off show Angel and like big parts of that. Like there's a big company called Wolfram and Hart that is an integral part of Angel that is woven into this first installment of Buffy, and I really enjoy how they've done that and I can't wait to see how it manifests throughout the series. Question number 7 is my new favorite author. I found this one really difficult actually because in terms of fantasy, which is my dominant genre, I've mainly been focusing on authors that I've already read from from and trying to catch up on their works. And then the newer fantasy that I've been reading, I'm not as much of a fan of. Like, I wouldn't say that I've found a new favorite book or series from an author that I haven't read from before yet in the fantasy genre. So for my new favorite author, I'm actually going with Talia Hibbert, who is the author of the Brown Sisters series. It is difficult because of the new authors that I've read this year. I haven't actually completed a series or read a whole ton of new stuff from them, but both installments of the Brown Sisters series I've really enjoyed so far. This is a series of rom-com style romances that are really funny and have some really like explicit, steamy, sexy time scenes in them. And one of the reasons why I love Talia Hibbert in this series, because this series is all I can speak about, is that the humor in here is very reminiscent of Louise Renison and the Confessions of Georgia Nicholson, but obviously for an adult audience. And the Georgia Nicholson series is my favorite series from my childhood, but I absolutely adore that about these. And as well as that, the romances are fire. So I'm very excited to read more from Talia Hibbert. I don't think she actually has anything that's like the same kind of vibe as the Brown Sisters series, but do let me know if you've read these, like where you think I should go from there, because I do think that the rest of her work is self-published and is more just like general smut, but I don't know for sure because I haven't finished this series yet, so I haven't done like a whole ton of research. But let me know, give me recommendations in the comments. Question number 8 is my new fictional crush, and I did struggle with this one because I don't feel like there are many characters that have left a lasting impression on me this year. So I went with one where I've read one book in the series this year, but I did read books in the series last year, so maybe a little bit of a cheat. But I'm going with Brash and Trell from the Live Ship Trader series by Robin Hobb. So this series is the second trilogy in the realm of the Eldlings. It's set in a different part of the world to the Farseer trilogy, and it is a multi-perspective adult fantasy that is very closely tied to small town politics and the trading families of this town called Bingtown. Now, Brash and Trell is the son of one of the Bingtown trading families. However, he has been disgraced and cast off, and at the beginning of the series he has been taken in by Ephraim Vestrit, who is the patriarch of one of the families, and taken onto their ship and essentially been given a chance that his own family won't afford him. Brash and Trell, I cannot even, you just gotta read it. There is like a romance plot throughout this series, so you do see him in like a little bit of a romantic light, but Brash and Trell is this like rugged, masculine sailor figure, but he also has like a little bit of a dark side to him, you know, like a little bit of self-doubt and stuff because of his past and what got him cast out with his family. And I don't know, I'm just a sucker. I'm a sucker for Brash and Trell. Question number 9 is your newest favorite character, and once again I struggled because I can't think of many characters who've made a lasting impression on me this year. So for this one I went with Nesta from A Court of Silver Flames. A Court of Silver Flames is the 4th installment in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, but it is also the start of a new story arc. So the first trilogy follows a young girl called Feyre, who when she is out hunting for her family accidentally kills a Fey shifter, and because of this she is dragged off to the fairyland to live out the rest of her life there as punishment for the life that she took. So Nesta is Feyre's sister, and she is a very unlikable character, and she just gets more and more of a bitch throughout the series. However, the main plot of this one is that Nesta is just being too much of a bitch essentially, so they send her away to get her shit together and sort herself out. So Nesta is essentially struggling with what happened at the end of the Core Akatar trilogy, and she has been struggling with PTSD. So I very deeply related to Nesta throughout the course of this book in the way that she treats herself and others because of the pain that she is dealing with. And my favorite thing about this book is Nesta's journey and her character development and the mental health and trauma rep in here. So Nesta is a character that I have kind of liked throughout the trilogy just because I'm always kind of like drawn to the bitch character, but I really like that this one delved into her, and yeah, I just related a lot to the things that she's been going through and the way that she is handling those emotions. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and I think that this is going to come as no surprise to anybody when I say that that is Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. I sobbed reading this book harder than I have sobbed at a book since 2018. It hit me deep. I was sobbing for quite a while as well. Like I just could not stop. But this one is the 3rd trilogy in the realm of the Eldlings, and it is a continuation of the story of the character in the 1st trilogy, Fit Chivalry Farseer. So Fool's Errand picks up when Fitz is 35. There's been a 15-year break in between the 2 trilogies, and the thing in here, like, we all knew it was coming. We all knew that it was coming, which makes you think think that I would have been emotionally prepared for when it actually happened, but just the way that it was written, like, I find Robin Hobb to be a really thoughtful writer, and she portrays things like mental health very well throughout her books, especially depression, and Fitz's story is miserable. It is truly miserable, and I think it is only going to get worse throughout the series, but this particular way and the way that it was written, I can't explain it unless you've read it, but it was the way that it was written that had me sobbing. It was beautiful, it was wonderfully done, and it was soul shattering. On the flip side of that, question 11 is a book that made you happy, and with me reading a lot of books like this, books that make you happy is always a struggle for me, but I have been reading some contemporary romance this year. So I'm gonna have to go with the Brown Sisters series for this. Like I said, it's really funny because it's romance. Like, the thing about romance is it always has to end in a happily ever after, otherwise it's not a romance. So you always know that you're going to have that good, like, uplifting moment at the end. And with these being just so funny and a little bit ridiculous in parts, they just really put me in a good mood. And I'm definitely looking at reading a lot more contemporary romance for those elements. I do like my contemporary romance, to be fair, to deal with some dark topics and be heavy and angsty and dramatic, so I don't normally reach for ones like these, but the Brown Sisters series is definitely a series that has put a big smile on my face this year. Question number 12 is the most beautiful book that you've bought or received this year, and for this one I'm going with the Fairy Loot Red Rising special editions, which are really not in the right order. What have I done? No, they are in the right order. So I think that Fairy Loot released these last year, however they recently did a fairy trove sale, I think at the end of May, and they put a few of these sets in stock, and I was so thrilled to be able to get my hands on these. It's not something I was interested in when they were originally announced because I haven't read this series, but when I saw people receiving them and the scythe on the spines, I was like, I need these. So I am actually reading Red Rising this month. It's on my July TBR, so please keep your fingers crossed that I actually enjoy this series, because I really hope I do, because the idea of me buying these is that if I didn't like them, I could get rid of them, it would be fine, but at least I wouldn't have the regret of not having them in case it turns out to be a series that I love. But I really want to love these just because these editions are so stunning. And question number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And as usual, I'm just gonna say all of them, because there's so much that I really want to read and have to read before the end of the year. But a couple of my main priorities, I guess, would be Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the final book in the Mistborn trilogy. I've heard that this is one of the best conclusions to a series that people have read, and The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first book in this series, is my favorite Sanderson book to date. So I'm really anticipating loving this one, and I still have not read a conclusion to a Sanderson series, so I'm really intrigued how he wraps things up, but I'm also a little bit scared of this one because I think it might make me cry. But I'm hoping to get to this one this year. And then one that I've been meaning to read since around February, I think, is Breath of Fire by Amanda Boucher. This is the sequel to A Promise of Fire. This one is a fantasy romance series that is inspired by ancient Greece. I really loved the first book. I also found it to be a very quick read, and I was desperate to continue. And then the months have just like passed, and I've just not picked this up. So I'd like to get to this one and also finish out the trilogy by the end of the year as well. So there you have it. That was my 2021 edition of the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. I cannot believe that this is the 4th time that I've done this. This is my 4th Booktube birthday. Can you believe it? The time has flown. It kind of feels, actually, it feels like I've been here forever and also like 2 minutes at the same time. But down in the comments, please let me know, let me think, what question should I pick for this? Please let me know what your newest fictional crush is, because I feel like that is most on brand for my channel. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish candle website, the Instagram for that, and 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're ready to go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.